Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Yep, it's the world's most dangerous morning show, The Breakfast Club. Charlamagne the God, Angela Yee, DJ Envy had to step out. Got our guy in here, Ari Melber. What's happening, brother?
What's going on?
How are you, man?
Thanks for having me back. Great to be here.
Absolutely.
First of all, congratulations for breaking records.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We hit this milestone. You know, when I took over the beat on MSNBC, we had fewer viewers than CNN. Now we have more viewers than CNN at 6 p.m. or any hour, more viewers than Dawn or Anderson, or shout out to everybody, but more viewers than any hour CNN, which I believe, you know, you guys have been gracious to have me in here, which I love. I believe it's because we try to do the news in a different, broader way, and people responded to it. And I'll just get this out of the way, and then we're done, you know, Charlamagne. Bring back the Concorde. Numbers don't lie. Check the scoreboard. So
But you're
thank you,
the
everyone.
longest running host in that time slot, too.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even remember what was there before you.
There was a show for about 5 months on there. There was Greta Van Susteren, and there were other shows before that. And 6 is a hard time. You know, a lot of people, now we get their news on the internet. People watch you guys on YouTube. Sometimes I hear the Breakfast Club live because I'm in New York, and a lot of people are in cities where we hear it on radio, but a lot of people watch the YouTubes, right? And so we found that even though people are getting the news different ways, we've been the longest running at 6 p.m. ever in MSNBC's 25-year history, because some people are like, oh, wait, this actually is worth tuning in for. They watch it live, and then a lot of people we find catch up with us on YouTube, which is great too.
Crafting an identity is very hard, you know, especially on a news network. But MSNBC seems to have done that with you and Joy Reid. I think of Tiffany Cross. Like, you know, when I think of y'all, I think of MSNBC personalities. Brian Williams.
Joy, Rachel, Brian, Lawrence, Tiffany, Jonathan Capehart, and then we've got a whole crew of people coming up, Jason Johnson. So I think they've done a great job building the bench in any field. TV, radio, internet, you know, you can be one person, that's fine, but you're always stronger together, and I love working with the people we have.
Do you think sometimes the news focuses on the wrong things? And I this is what I mean by this, right? Like, you know, when the whole Nicki Minaj controversy happened, you know, Kyrie Irving, like I think about Nicki saying Drake was fully vaccinated. I think about Nicki saying she was going to get vaccinated. I think about the fact that 96% of the NBA is vaccinated, but the news wants to focus on the people who are not. Don't you think that's a detriment if you're pro-vaccine?
Well, two things. One, you're right, because the news is drawn to conflict. I always say, like, it's great when planes land, but we don't do a lot of breaking stories. We're like, yo, you're not going to believe what happened at JFK.
All the time.
Yo, like 100 planes landed.
Right.
Like, great.
So it's the out of the ordinary.
But we do cover when the plane crashes or when it's missing, and that makes sense. Now, where I agree with your premise, what I think you're getting at is, well, what if it wasn't a plane crash and it starts to feel like the news is kind of making it into worse than it is? And that is a problem. And so I think if we do it responsibly, and we could always try to take criticism constructively, because I know what you want is better news, right? If someone's a troll on the internet saying whatever, it's like I might not pay attention to that. If Angela and Charlamagne are saying, but wait a minute, was this accurate about this situation or community? Yeah. So I think leaning into the conflict when it's not representative is definitely not the most accurate.
But it's hard not to report on Kyrie right now. I mean, he's not playing with the Nets, so that's kind of a big deal.
Who cares?
The Nets and Nets fans.
Yeah, that should be a Brooklyn story then.
Do care.
Why the national news? You
well,
know
you don't have
I mean?
to live in Brooklyn to be a fan of Kyrie or the Nets. I mean, a lot of people, we want to see him play.
I just don't think
he's
how
not playing, so you got to understand why and what's going on, because it is a decision that the average person does still have to make. I think when you take it out of just the Brooklyn Nets, it's kind of representative of people who are losing their jobs and making that decision because they don't want to get vaccinated. It's a big story.
Yeah, but they're not getting $20 million to lose their job, though. Kyrie's still getting $20 million this year.
Right. I mean, it's a way bigger representation, but people are having to make really tough decisions.
I think also you said something else I wanted to get to that relates to what you're bringing up. People look to signaling. So they're trying to figure out if some people are contrarian. They're like, I have a view no one has. That's dope. Most people, they'll look to signaling, and they look to experts, right, which might be, oh, you know something, a doctor or an expert. But they might look to other people, which is like, depending on the issue, I know you guys had Ava in here the other day. A lot of people went anti-Colin Kaepernick, right? But people might look and say, but actually, I trust him over what everyone else was saying. And over time, I think more people went to him. And so that's why when you get into medicine, it's tricky, because I do think there are things you can learn from experts that you can't get from everyone else.
Right.
But yes, this debate about the vaccine, what do you know about it? Why is it safe? Turns out it is very safe. What about your personal liberty? People are allowed to have liberty. And what about why you're skeptical of the government? And people in certain communities are more skeptical of the government for good reason. So it's tricky. Whether a given player is overcovered, I think, is a fair question because most people are getting it. Most people are finding it works really well. And so if you lean overly into the conflict, you might be giving people a misperception this is more contested than it is.
It's just strange, right? Like when LeBron makes his comments and LeBron says, me and my family are fully vaccinated. We made the best decision for us. We did our research, whatever. Then they ask him, well, would you want to be an advocate? And he goes, no. I don't need LeBron to be an advocate. But then everybody focuses on that side of the story instead of the fact him and his whole family got vaccinated. I'm like, are y'all pro-vax or not? Because if I'm watching the news and the story is LeBron says he doesn't want to be an advocate for the vaccine, what does that do to a skeptic? It's like, see? LeBron doesn't want to be an advocate for the vaccine. Might not even have heard LeBron got vaccinated.
Right. You're saying, like, that's in law, we call that like a trap question. Because you could answer it accurately and then it still gets played a certain way.
Yep.
To be very clear, people do it different ways. On the beat, it's not that we are selling the vaccine. We're not. We are telling you facts, and as the facts came in over time, it became clear how safe it is and how well it's working. But again, we're still not selling it. The government may sell it as a public health project, and other journalists may do it a different way. But you could search my show and or social media. You will not find me telling someone or instructing someone what to do. And that's the news. I get to interview Fauci. Just like you guys talk to a lot of people. Like the idea that then we would go over here and ask ball players or other people to it's like, why? Isn't that a funny thing about our society? Like people who are people who are super celebrities, the people that everybody knows their name. It's like, you could go get them on anything, just like they could endorse any product. And it's like, why would we care, like, what alcohol they drink? What alcohol do you like? You know what alcohol tastes like. You can afford a shot.
And then we get outraged.
We take their word. Yeah, it's weird.
You get outraged. But why did you ask a ball player about the vaccine to begin with? It's weird. Do you think it's because there's no Trump? So I'm serious. So the news doesn't have an enemy? They don't have a boogeyman right now?
No, because I think this stuff predates Trump.
Okay.
I think, and look, when they set up the country, the founders were so worried about the abuse of power by government, which still is a thing, but they didn't think a lot about corporations, let alone celebrities. And if you actually look at like power right now, there are corporations that are more powerful than countries, which is more power than governments, and there are some celebrities where it's just like their following is larger than a country. And their following is more loyal than a lot of politicians. I interview politicians, sometimes it's like they couldn't fill a room.
Right.
They could squeak through an election, but they couldn't sell out Barclays. And then we have celebrities and entertainers and performers who, because of the nature of media now, as you know, because you guys talk to them, the following is epic. So I do understand the temptation to say, well, if they have such a large following, how do you move it towards good? But then what is good and what is staying in their lane? And I mean, I'm a big Bob Marley fan. I studied his career. Like, when Jamaica was going through tough times, everyone was going to him saying, maybe you can help. And he ultimately tried to do unity things. He did a unity concert. He was also shot. But part of the question there was his moral authority was because he didn't pick a side on every little thing. He talked about Black power. Right. He talked about liberation. He talked about anti-colonialism. He talked about a lot of issues, no question. But he didn't get into like, and now endorsed in the 14th Ward, because he was bigger than that. And when he did step into politics, it wasn't great. So I do think I'm super interested in politics, but it doesn't mean everyone with a following has to engage at that level.
You think the vaccine is basically politics at this point?
100%.
I mean, don't you think, well, there's what the facts are as always, but then don't you think that like it's gotten so, like, here's how I'll tell you it's politics.
Take a sip of water first, Ari. I know you look parched. I see you wanted it.
Well, you know I'm so thirsty in the game. That's why I'm always drinking the water. You'd be like, they let him come to some of the parties. I let him show up. He still seems thirsty. It's like, yeah, this is how I am. Here's how I'll tell you it's politics. And again, I'm going to say, I've said this on my program. People have to make their own decisions about medicine. All I want you to make sure is that you have factual information. If based on the facts, you say, well, it looks like actually I'm low risk rate, or I don't interact with a lot of people, or I'm 22 and I'm waiting longer because worst case, that's my choice. Fine. But if you're telling me, well, I don't want it because it was designed by Bill Gates to microchip surveil me. I'm like, but that's not true. So let's remove one of the false things. And why would you want to live your life based on a lie? I mean, that's not a good way to live. Having said that, I'm not here to say once you have all the facts, you make the choice. Now, why do we know it's on politics? Because you have Republican politicians who sent their kids to school where there were 15 vaccine requirements that they all satisfied. And you have people who went to the military where the vaccine's required for all these other things. And now all of a sudden, in this moment, they changed. They changed up after their whole life. So obviously by action, not by anything else, but by your actions, you didn't have a problem not only with vaccines of many types, but with vaccine mandates, which are, of course, mumps, measles, everything in the schools. So that raises the question, why is this so different? And then you have a lot of people rooting against Biden, looking for fights with Biden.
Right.
But that doesn't mean, again, that the individual person, that's a politician. The individual person might still say they want to do their work. Fine, do your work and figure it out. We've also reported on, if anyone's listening to me again, I don't have a dog in this fight in that way. Like, I don't stand to benefit one way or the other.
Right.
But I'll tell you this, we've done a lot of stories where we hear from people on the deathbed. I was against the vaccine for this and that reason, but I didn't really understand. Now I got this. I see how bad it is. I understand that I could have been saved, and I wish I knew earlier. And they're telling other people. So don't just take my word for it. Listen to that. And then again, make your own decision. We covered a story within the last 2 weeks. Well, the vaccine's readily available in America. Both parents got COVID, had time right before they died to speak out, and they did speak out saying they wish they got the vaccine. They're both dead. They have 5 kids that are orphaned.
Now,
That's
I hear
real.
people always talking about stories about the vaccine killing people. People will call up here and say that. They'll go on my social media page. Oh, but you're not talking about all the stories about people who've been harmed by the vaccine or killed. What about the facts on that?
The facts are that the CDC has not found that the vaccine carries anything like deadly side effects. So the fact is that is not a documented thing. There are some side effects, which is why you can consult with a doctor and look into it. And also
headaches, fatigue.
You're tired a couple days after. And depending on your medical situation, right? Some people have very particular medical situations, right? Mm-hmm. Which in the context of COVID has generally meant you're more likely to need it, like if you're immunocompromised.
Right, and they tell you get a booster shot in addition.
But just to be clear, the evidence has not shown that the vaccine is more dangerous than COVID.
Healthcare workers being required to get vaccinated? Because we have had this discussion up here several times where they talk about how they were frontline workers, essential workers, risking their lives, some people dying, getting sick, and then now they're not vaccinated and they're having to lose their job because of that.
That's a policy choice, right? So you could imagine a scenario where requiring everyone once this is less dangerous seems extreme, and you try to find compromise. At the moment that there's then this many deaths and the government's trying to curb the spread, the government makes you put on gloves when you're a healthcare worker. Mm-hmm. Someone says, I don't want to put on a glove. Okay, that's cool. Maybe this isn't the right job for you right now, while gloves are something that slow the spread.
It just feels really effed up that last year they were essential workers and this year they are so expendable.
I feel that, and again, that's why I say it's a policy trade-off. I'm not going to sit here and say, there's only one way to do it. Mm-hmm. Because, for example, if this thing fades, then 5 years from now, medically, the risk of whether someone is vaccinated may not be a huge deal, and thus they might still be able to be a first responder healthcare worker, even though the experts, the CDC, most of these hospitals feel that is safer. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I think that's a trade-off issue, and I think it sucks if they did do all this great public service and then they feel they're being shunted to the side, especially if they have a really conscious objection, like religious or really personal, and they've really looked into it and they really have a strong reason. So I respect that. I understand where they're coming from. But again, there's a ton of rules to work in a hospital, right? And so someone who says, well, they have an objection to some of those rules, that might not be the job. And then the same with public first responders, firefighter, police. I've seen a lot of the unions, they've been talking about it. This should be debated, but generally if you're talking about the law and the rules, like, there's a lot of rules that police have to follow. They're supposed to follow, and if they can't follow them, then that might not be the right job for them. The other thing is, since this is getting super serious, which is kind of lighten it, Kendrick did say, I'm the vaccine the game needs me to survive. So that he believes the vaccines work.
Maybe.
Or it was a
It could
good
have been
bar.
just a good bar. Yeah, exactly. This is my last thing about the vaccine because it's actually about a larger issue. You think we do a good job of turning the page? Sometimes we just go cover from cover to things, meaning this time last year, right before the election, right, it was the Democrats saying we can't trust the vaccine. It was now Vice President Harris. It was then Governor Cuomo. It was Joe Biden. They were saying all of the things about the CDC and the FDA. Like Governor Cuomo literally said, somebody else is going to have to tell me to take this vaccine other than the CDC and the FDA. Can't trust them. They were saying things like, who's going to take this vaccine? It's being rushed out. But then when they got, and I knew it, when they got in the White House, narrative changed. But where are those pages? Tell me what caused those ideas to change.
I think that's fair. There was such objections to Trump for good reasons that it may have spread, or to use a medical term, metastasized, and made people against everything. And that, of course, undermines trust in government and civic trust. And demagogues, by the way, do that. They create an environment where you don't trust anything, government, the news. That's shown throughout history. But usually that helps the demagogues more than everyone else. So be careful if somebody like Trump breaks everything and then you say, nothing works, because that's a fertile ground for them. Number two, I think there were plenty of people on whatever you want to call it, the center-left, Democrats, who still were broadly trying to follow the CDC cues and science. But I know
those are the big dogs.
But I know what you're talking about. There was that energy, and I think whenever that's happening, that's wrong. I mean, my job as a journalist, I call that out and say that's wrong. And
just tell me what made you change your mind. That's all I want to know.
Well, that they should be transparent about that.
That's right.
And then it goes to also, our government is not supposed to have everything changed by one person in power, even someone as powerful as the president. So Fauci stayed in office, right? Fauci's been very respected by both parties. Forget the vaccine. Let's say you have a vaccine concern. Fauci was back here standing up for people who were HIV positive at a time when there was misinformation. People were being, against them because of ideas about their identity or who they want to sleep with, which has nothing to do with health. And he was right about that. Decades running. Now, he was in government during the Trump era, right? And we're supposed to have that. We're supposed to have people who, in science, in law enforcement, even at the Fed, the markets, who are not just switching based on partisanship. But I do think, yes, we have gotten to a super partisan place, which makes life harder than it needs to be.
What are facts nowadays, Ari?
A fact, that's a deep question. A fact is an observable, provable piece of information. It is something that can be established. And there are facts. And then there are things that are believed. Those are theses. And then there are things that are provably false. Those are false. And if you knowingly share something that's false, meaning it's false, that's a lie. And so we need to keep that spectrum in mind, because there's a big difference between someone repeating something that they don't understand. I don't want to vilify that person. If they're of good faith, we might chop it up and talk about it. I mean, one weird thing about doing news on TV is people come up to me all the time, and it ranges from, hey, let's talk about the facts, to someone who seems informed, to someone who's less informed, to I was covering a Trump event, and this guy came up to me, and what I'm about to say is false. So if you're watching on YouTube, this is not true. But he said to me, I know you do the news. You seem like you might be fair. Can I ask you something? I said, sure. He goes, they tried to assassinate Trump twice in Europe, and no one talks about it.
And I was like,
that's not true.
Oh.
And then I look at him, and he's got a shirt on with the Q. He's got the Q in it.
Oh, okay.
But this was years ago, actually. Funny enough. This was over 3 years ago. And I'm looking at him, and I'm just like, where is the realm of engagement here? Right. And it's hard to follow that conspiracy theory. If you're pro-Trump, everyone hit it, incling Trump. They tried to kill him. He wouldn't talk about it.
Trump would definitely have let you know that he survived 2 assassination attempts.
So, right. I mean, that's
he survived more assassination attempts than any president ever. I can see it. So he'll absolutely do it.
So then that's someone who, now, is that a lie, or does he believe it, or is he deranged to some degree? But that's on a spectrum where we're not going to get through that conversation and get to a lot of progress. But we do have to keep an eye on what the real facts are, and also keep open-minded what may be a contested fact. And I think if you want to really talk about the energy, it's some people get so up on it that they are talking about a wider set of things beyond what is an established fact and claiming it as a fact for their side. And that sometimes turns people off. Mm-hmm. Other people, though, are out here. I mean, I see it. People out here being like, yeah, but what do we really know? I'm like, well, gravity is a force that keeps us from floating up in the room. If we didn't have gravity, which has been documented, we wouldn't be just naturally on the floor right now. We'd be floating. Mm-hmm. Right? But if somebody goes, yeah, that's what you say. Mm-hmm. I mean, do we really know? Mm-hmm. And then you have to be like, yeah.
We
no, we really do. Well, okay, but like maybe somebody wants you to believe in gravity. And you're like, maybe, but also gravity's real. That's why you're not floating.
That's right. It's something.
So I see this energy now more and more, and I see it across the spectrum, like meaning right and left.
Question everything.
Where it's just like, but you don't even know, right? And that's the same thing. Yeah, should you question the books you were taught in school? Absolutely. Should you question the news? Absolutely. Should you watch more than one or read more than one news source? Absolutely, because you should have multiple sources. I do. I work hard. My team, we work hard to fact check, but like absolutely check more than one. But should you come out on some other extreme and be like, well, because things were bad and these people were racist and it was fine, that nothing can be established? That's nuts.
Can I ask your opinion on something?
Maybe.
Okay.
Depends what it is.
So Joe Biden's low ratings. They've been talking about how low his ratings are right now. He has said he's not doing that to get, he's not doing his job for the ratings. He's doing it because of what's most important. So what do you think about how Joe Biden's been handling things during his presidency, and what do you attribute those low ratings to?
Well, I think you ask a very interesting question, the premise being like, what's really going on? There was this incredible time with Trump. There was this backlash. You put this new person in, and then why are his ratings low? I heard one comic say when he dropped into like mid-low 40s, mm-hmm. and they were like, that's right about where Trump was after Charlottesville. They were like, can you imagine the polling briefing? We're like, Mr. President, you've made a lot of change. You're polling right above Nazi sympathizers. Like, how do you pull that low? And so, two things. One, we just went through this incredible public testing trauma of the Trump era, which was more trying on some than others, mm-hmm. but was tough, and a pandemic. So these aren't like easy or good times where everyone's in a great mood or things are going great anyway. Right when you get out of something like that, meaning right when Trump, remember, even though Trump is a symptom of long-running American racism, misogyny, and other problems, he's a symptom. He didn't create racism in America. When you look at getting out of that, right, he got fewer votes the first time. He got fewer votes the second time. There were a lot of people in this country who still didn't want him to be our leader and got out of it. It's a little bit like getting right out of a terrible relationship or right out of a terrible job if you really don't like your job. Those first few weeks, you just get up and you're like, I don't go to work there anymore, like that. But that's not going to carry you through a whole administration or a first term. So I think what Biden got initially was a lot of benefit of not Trump. But then when Earth returns and people say, well, it's still a weird and tough economy. There's still the pandemic and all the drama of that.
Voting rights still getting suppressed everywhere.
Voter suppression.
No George Floyd Policing Act being passed.
A lot of things that we were told might break through didn't. I think there's energy around that. And then number two, there's Joe Biden being someone who basically at this juncture is with a really tight Congress. So everything's down to one vote every single time. And they've passed some things like the stimulus, but they haven't made progress on a lot of the other things, including what you mentioned. So I think that gives you a situation where you have opposition. They're against him no matter what. Then you have some crumbling of what would be his supporters being like, but what are you doing?
What can Joe Biden do about that, by the way? Because some people feel like he should be able to get things done regardless of Congress.
Well, one, we don't have a democracy in this country. We have to really understand that, right? You ever hear people say, oh, we're the oldest democracy? Well, if everyone can't vote, that's not a democracy, right? So people couldn't vote by gender. People couldn't vote by race. Then you get up to maybe you say you're restoring voting rights for minorities, but then there's a multi-decade backlash against that that's violent, that's anti-black terrorism, right? So then you say, oh, well, then we had MLK, then with civil rights there. All right, you could say maybe we started getting close to a democracy in the 60s, right? That's just at voting rights. Then you look at how are we run. We are not run as a democracy because the Congress, the Senate, doesn't do one person, one vote, doesn't pretend to. Mm-hmm. So then on top of that, you have this thing where they obstruct votes with the filibuster. So Biden says, are you for or against family leave? Are you for or against money so people can have college tuition, people who normally couldn't afford it, like they do in a lot of Europe. That doesn't even get a vote, an up or down vote, because we're not a democracy, right? We're not a full democracy. That the whatever minority party, in this case the Republicans, can just prevent that from having a vote. So what would he have to do? He'd have to start changing those kind of things if he wanted to go hard, but he'd need the Democrats. It sounds like a catch-22. He'd need all 50 Democrats in the Senate to get on board with that. The moment they do that, then you could have a floor vote on what we just talked about, voting rights, policing, economics.
And Vice President Harris, the tie-breaking vote.
And she'd be the tie-breaking vote, but right now,
everything's
subjected to that obstruction filibuster. So it's like, and then it's like, again, if somebody's listening to this interview, they're like, you had what, the news guy on, and then you asked why things don't work, and then it was like a 3-minute answer. Like, this is how long it takes just to explain why nothing's getting done.
I'd say 4 things that Joe Biden's administration has to do to protect democracy. 1, you got to protect voting rights. 2, you got to get rid of the filibuster so you can properly govern. I think that people just ignored Hillary when she said that a few weeks ago and said we're headed to minority rule if we don't. 3, you got to pack the Supreme Court. And 4, you got to prosecute hard people that were behind the coup on January 6th. You do those 4 things, you protect democracy. You don't, boy, it's going to be tough.
Right, because that's all well put, and we're living through this time. And there was a writer who said a failed coup that goes unpunished is a training exercise.
That's right. I heard you say that on the show. That's hard.
Think about that.
Yeah.
These people are out here, and part of it is about race and the changing nature of where America is going. And can you handle that? Because either A, you believe in equality and democracy, which means you believe in the right of the winner to rule, whoever they are, whatever they look like, which is just basic. Or B, you're not threatened by this change because you think we can all be better as a cohesive, diverse society. Or 3, you can't handle that. And you say you only support democracy when it results in your side winning. And if not, you'll try to do an authoritarian structure. And we've seen societies that have division. They can go either way. They can go, I hate to quote a bar here because that's just not, I don't want
that's what you do. All right, that's what you do.
But on the new album, J. Cole, when he says it's going to go one way or the other, it can go up or it can go down. And I felt that like very simply because it's like sometimes things just stay the same. Status quo, get your check, go home, go out on the weekend, next week, go to work. Status quo. That's life sometimes. Other times you're at that point, it's like in a relationship or in a moment, it could go up or it can go down. It's not going to stay the same. That's where America is right now because of the coup, because of the racism, because of the resurgent white supremacy. It was there, but now it's really out in the open. A lot of people have guns. This is all reality. I'm not trying to get anyone scared. I want everyone to be aware and vigilant.
This is real, yeah.
But this is real. So you have to say, where are the forces for democracy versus the forces that they said it what they would do? The fact that Donald Trump has not been completely decommissioned from democracy, public life, when he literally said, I don't trust the outcome of the election. I want to hold on to power, and I want to lead a violent mob to help me do it. Right? So we've seen countries that go up. There are countries that have been in this testing ground, and they've prevailed. So I don't want people to hear this and say, oh, forget it. But there are others that have not.
That's right.
So we have to be really real about that.
That wasn't enough, what he said. The 12 obstruction of justice charges in the Mueller report wasn't enough. It's just like, I really got to look at the Democrats and just be like, yo, they're cowards. They're scared to enforce. Imagine if the Republicans were in the position the Democrats were in right now.
Forget it.
Come on, man. There'd be no questions asked. All right, let's talk about something light. The Super Bowl. How do you feel about the lineup? Are you happy?
I always try to keep it 100. I can't tell you who's playing in the Super Bowl.
Oh, no, the halftime show.
Oh, the halftime
Yeah,
show.
We don't know who's playing in the Super Bowl.
The
Yeah.
let me tell you,
I
the
don't
Cowboys
cover
will definitely be there.
Okay.
But the halftime
I
show.
was like, when is it?
Dr. Dre, Eminem,
Dre,
Snoop Dogg,
Kendrick.
Kendrick, Mary
Yeah.
J. Blige.
I love it. So no, first when I saw the, all right, I feel way better. I was like, why is
Like, I
Charlamagne
don't
asking
know
me
who's
about
playing.
sports? My first thought was just like, how do you get, like, it's like a super group, and Snoop's got his own other super group going, but I was like, how do you get all these people together? So I love it. And do you think they'll all be literally playing together, like,
I mean, they all got
tracks together?
They all got records. I wish it was just Dre and Snoop, and then all of those, like Kendrick, Mary, and M came out as guests. So I feel like Dre and Snoop are icons living. All of them are, right? But those two should have had that moment for L.A., and they just bring out who they wanted to bring out for halftime.
I like that. I mean, is it a business thing where everybody needs to be at an equal level stop.
No, I thought
shared
it was
billing?
Dr. Dre curating it because he's the one that made the statement in the press release.
Yeah.
So I think it was Dr. Dre that put together the halftime show because it's all kind of based around him.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. I wish it was just Dre and Snoop as the main event, and then those people came out as guests. Remember when Katy Perry did it and Missy came out as a guest and everybody lost their shit?
Yeah.
That would have been nuts.
That makes sense. And they have so many like bangers together.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like, shout out to Kendrick, but like I don't feel like for that kind of international Super Bowl audience that he has the same type of songs. So I'll be curious to see how they use him.
Yeah. No, that's not a bad point.
And Eminem, who a lot of people like, and everyone remembers, like his early stuff, right, also is like more fun, lyrical, but again, not the kind of bangers of like Dre.
He could do
Snoop.
Lose Yourself.
Yeah, he could do Lose Yourself.
That would
Lose
go
Yourself,
crazy.
yeah.
Kendrick could do We Gonna Be All Right.
That would be the
a big
one, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm shocked that Jay hasn't put himself as a halftime performer yet. It says a lot about him, right? As you have on Rockefeller Air Force Ones.
I do. Well, but Jay said the Super Bowl needs him. He doesn't need the Super Bowl.
But he also said that before he joined forces with the NFL.
And then
Right.
it's LA. You also got to curate what's right for LA.
Are you fact checking a bar? But sir,
Bars evolve, like times change, you know what I mean?
I mean, no, that really makes me think though, like, because Super Bowl. So Clive Davis said something very interesting. You know, did a million things in music, including working with Diddy on Bad Boy, and I was asking him because I always ask people. I don't ask people I just ask people a question. I just want to know, literally. So I was like, when you look at the history of his Grammy party, the number of performers he has, I was like, I'm just curious, like, are you paying these people? And if not, how do you get them to perform? And he said no, because it's a party it's not the same thing as performance. And he said something to them, and I think this applies to Super Bowl, which is why I bring it up. Because he's had people, if people know the Grammy party, I mean, he's had people at either right before they blow up or right at their peak. And you're like, wow. And they're performing like the Grammy Eve. He says, I always ask myself, I always tell them this is not another business gig. This is the most important people in music all in one room, most of whom you'll only see once a year in one room. And a lot of people, as you guys know, a lot of the bigger artists, they'll go to that party, but they don't go to the actual, sit in the actual Grammys if they're not up.
Yeah.
And he said, I tell them, you're a star right now. Performing for this room could make you a superstar. And it's sort of like that thing, right? And I feel like the Super Bowl is like that because you could be so big that like everyone who watches Breakfast Club, everyone in hip hop's like, of course they ride with you. But now you're like people in Brazil and France and Uganda.
They know who you are now.
Like from the Super Bowl because you just, it's crazy. So that's why I think it's so big. But I would definitely think, I mean, Beyonce did it. I would think Jay.
Yeah.
Don't you think? All right, this is the other thing. I don't know this, but I would expect that by the end of whatever that NFL business, Rock Nation, all the different business deals, because he thinks 8 moves ahead as a billionaire, and shout out to Hope for Hall of Fame and LL Cool J. I would think by the end, Jay does play a halftime show by the end of that deal.
Yeah, I would think so too. Absolutely. It would only make sense, right? It only makes sense. I've seen you outside a lot too, Ari.
We out here?
You be
Yeah,
outside
yeah.
a lot. A lot
We
of
outside?
album listening parties and events and stuff like that.
Okay.
What is that about?
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Are you just making the rounds?
Why
Or?
can't he be out? Ari's
just
a fun
asking.
party guy.
Well, wait, but no, like I'll answer your question, but because you know we both. The thing I love coming with you guys is like we both do this.
I'm just asking.
So I want to know what do you mean by your question, and then I'll answer.
I'm just
Like,
asking.
but why wouldn't I be out?
I don't go out. So I never go to those stuff.
You don't like?
Nah, I don't like it.
Why not?
Probably social anxiety, probably, more than likely, if I had to pinpoint it. Yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah.
same question.
I didn't say
when you
anything
go-
was wrong with it.
No, but when you go, do you like going to those things?
Yeah, I actually have a good time.
And I never want to feel obligated to those people because they think when you come to their event, like when something happens and they're in the news, you know, they want you not to have an opinion. I've seen.
Oh, I know about that.
Yeah.
I mean, we have that in politics. We have that, but we have to just be very independent, and you guys are independent. I mean, also, well,
You see how I am. You came to one of my parties.
I did. That was
Yeah.
fun. Deuce A and the whole thing. Your birth, yeah, the
bowling birthday
the birthday
party.
bowling.
Yeah.
Well, if I may, you do your job independently, but you're diplomatic. You do your job. You come at people, so no one's going to think if you show up at a party, at least at this stage, that like, oh, Charlamagne's at the party, so he won't, because you clash. I mean, I saw what the Thug interview. You took like time out of the interview to just deal with the fact that he felt that you had been
critical of him.
Tough on him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I think at that, just to push back on your answer, that's not really why you can't go to parties right now, because people know you're like that, and people know you're independent, even if you're nice to them diplomatically, right?
Right.
Yeah, I just don't like to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, like, I work very hard, and there's a lot of times in my life where I've just put in a lot of work, and I've had more than one job at a time, or I'm in law school, but I'm also like writing articles and freelancing and trying to get them published, and I'm like running to my law school test, but then
You still in law school?
No, I'm saying when I was in law
got
school.
you.
When I was in law school, I'm saying like I'd be like on the way to the test, and then get a note, oh, the editor wants changes to the article again.
Got you.
And I'm like just working really hard to get where I need to get, but the stuff never gets old to me because I never take it for granted that, like, for 12-year-old me, that a Tiana Taylor or a Snoop or someone that I think is an amazing artist is like come through, or they're people. I'm not saying they're like that it's so personal, but it's like that I'm even allowed to come up in there, I'm invited. To me, that's wild. Like that will never get old. I love
and I know
through.
that people appreciate it too when you do show up. Like, it means a lot if someone's having a listening party and they can say, "Oh, Charlamagne was there, Ari Melber was there." That's a big deal for people.
But I think for you, not for me.
People enjoy watching
for
you on
you,
the news,
definitely.
Ari, for sure.
I don't think
100%.
about it like that. I mean, I don't. To be honest, I don't feel like that if I walk into a room. I don't feel that. Well, how about this? If I go to like an event at a law school, I feel more of that.
Right.
Where people are like, oh, chief legal correspondent here. When I go to a hip hop event, definitely it's love, but I don't feel that it's like, I don't think it's exciting to Snoop that I showed up.
I'm sure he appreciates it though.
I
Not
think
that
so.
but I think people appreciate that. Like, that's dude that can quote my lyrics. You
And
know.
the news has a perception, which you've broken in a lot of ways. Like, in a lot of ways, you could be considered like how Stuart Scott was to sports.
Respect.
Right? You know what I mean? So you've broken a lot of those perceptions of what people think a news anchor is supposed to be like.
That's fair. So I love it. I mean, I get excited, and I go in there, and I love meeting people, and I love meeting artists. I mean, after family and friendship, right? People in your life. To me, music is the most important thing. If you said, oh, you could fly on a jet to the fanciest place in the world and go do something
With
expensive.
Elon Musk.
Yeah, exactly. Or, versus go be with artists that you grew up on or that you love, and in a way that's actually like personal. Because I go to concerts, that's just the music, right? Then if you're in the room, it's like, and they're playing the new album, like listening party. I'm just like, this is the dopest thing. Like, it's so exciting. It's so fun. And music also, to be really like technical, where else are you doing something where you're all experiencing the same thing at the same time that's actually partly in your body and mind?
Absolutely.
Like, our eardrums and our mind and our heartbeat and our rhythm is all shared.
Right.
That's why music will not, that's why like technology and all this other shit can change. When we were around the campfire, like
Drums playing, something.
dancing.
Yeah.
And here we are millennia later, and that's still, and everybody knows that when you're at all the big things. You're at a wedding, or you're at a concert, or you're even with playing, the anthem and all the fights we had. Why was the anthem such a thing? Well, because a lot of people feel ways about the anthem. And then you get back to, well, why do you feel that way? Well, has this country always made you feel like that's your anthem and you're part of it, or not? But like that comes back to the fact that the music is deeper than anything. So to me, that's like why I love that. And then second, the other answer that's more basic is just, as a journalist, I've always tried to be in the room with people, including people I disagree with or that might seem like, what's their perspective? Or nowadays we have a society where some people are saying, well, if I disagree with someone, I don't even want to hear it. Well, I've never been like that personally, and professionally, I can't be like that. So, like I said, I mentioned covering that MAGA event. Like, that's because I was covering it. So as a reporter, so it's a job, but just like showing up in a room, you're like, yeah, now I'm in the room with these people. I can eye to eye, and I'm going to learn something, and they might learn something, and that you can't get that any other way.
Outside of the numbers, the reason I know you're making an impact is because people enjoy watching you to get news, and I see people hating on you sometimes too. I'm not gonna say hating; they just be like critical, like, "Why is this guy always quoting rap lyrics?" Bless you.
Thank you.
Why is
Bless
he always
you.
quoting rap lyrics? It feels like cultural appropriation. Why is he always quoting rap lyrics?
Well, Moneybagg Yo did say, the hate be so real. and the love be so fake.
Ari, as an attorney, I did want to ask you one thing, too. Julius Jones and that situation.
Yeah, we've been covering that.
I know. That's why I wanted
in
to
news
ask
we call this a hard term, but that's very important.
Right, so I want to discuss that because I'm sure for you, you have to be looking at this and be like, why was he on death row at all? You know, when you see a young man, he was, I guess, 19 at the time, and there's somebody else that confessed to this murder, and then his family said he was at home. How did this even end up happening? What do you think about the death penalty in the country?
So, super important case we've been covering repeatedly on The Beat. From my knowledge, because I watched The Breakfast Club, but have you all touched on the case a lot or not?
Not a lot, but we've addressed it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing for people to understand is there was a very serious crime. This individual was just shot in his driveway with his kids right there. So it's a very heinous crime, and you can understand why people want someone to answer for it. This individual, Julius Jones, had no prior violent convictions, just had like some petty larceny, and was in school on an academic scholarship. So there were questions about whether this really fit the profile, but he was convicted in a trial where, and is now on death row awaiting execution, in a trial where a juror, it was an almost all-white jury, and a juror said to another juror, I don't see why we need to even deliberate. This is a black man accused of murder. This blank,
N-word,
an epithet, N-word, should just be lynched.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Then was convicted in that trial and is awaiting execution, which is the most serious thing the government can do, which is to take someone's life. And the first question, the legal question is, was that a fair trial?
I would say probably not.
Most people
and they commuted his sentence,
would
right?
say no. Now to fast forward, just this week, and we covered this last week, it's all been coming to a head because he's on schedule to be executed, and the key board, which doesn't usually do this, so it also tells you how extreme some of the facts are. Oklahoma, not a very lenient place for civil rights or justice issues. The board recommended clemency for him, which means not executing him based on some of these questions, and now it'll be the governor's final call. So I'll tell you basically two things. We covered this one because it's a very important case. When you see these kind of cases with this much evidence and they're still going forward to take a life, it just shows you the kind of justice system we have. I could give all the speeches, I could use words, right? When I tell the news, it's like, I don't need to sit here and start the broadcast and tell you, this justice system's racist. This is my opinion. No, let me just show you the facts, and then you look at whether you want to live with this. And if you live in that place, right, the order that you might take for granted is backed by a government system of this kind of force used by officers in the field. We've talked a lot about that in the last 2 summers. And then this kind of force where this is what's backed by. Number 2, for the death penalty, you can debate whether or not, in theory, the government taking lives is a good idea. That's over here, out the window, because that's not what happens. In America, the death penalty is used virtually solely against the poor and black and brown people. Against the poor and black and brown people. That's it. So you have to then say, well, forget the theory. Do you want to live in a society where we are part of this? This is our responsibility, where the government executes people only of certain groups. And even if you took race out of it, we talk a lot about race. It's racist. I could document that for you. But even if you took race out and said, just watched a movie, some dystopian future movie or Black Mirror episode or whatever, and they said, the people with money never pay this penalty. Only the poor people do. Does that sound fair?
No.
That's how it actually works today. That's how I cover it. But again, my style, you guys know this, but anyone listening, my style is not to start my program with, here's my opinion about the death penalty, so you should agree with me, because why?
That's
why
why I like to ask your opinion.
Why shouldn't I agree with you? But I can show you that, and if I showed you a country where they did the death penalty different, then you might feel some way about that. But we're not in. That's why, like, you could be at a barbecue or something, and someone says, well, if somebody did something to my, family member, I would want the ultimate justice, and be like, yeah, but it might not be available. Like, let's look at who's really getting killed by the state.
That's real. Has Jay-Z reached out to you yet?
No, no.
Damn, still?
No.
Well, I was trying to think, like,
You've quoted him more than any rapper,
Are we
I
going to
think.
count, like,
You got on some Rockefeller.
You've quoted him more than any
sneakers.
rapper, clearly.
100%.
Yeah.
But I've talked to people around him, and I've talked to his team. So again, I don't want that misconstrued. Like, great team, met with people, top people at Rock Nation, and we of course have pitched the idea of a special great interview. But no, if I want a Jay-Z interview, I just put back on the Breakfast Club classic.
True.
Which is a good one.
It is.
Gems
a great
in
one.
that one.
Great one. Well, listen, make sure y'all check out Ari Melber every night at 6 p.m. on MSNBC. Always a pleasure, brother.
Yes,
Anything
always
else?
a pleasure.
I just love being back in the Breakfast Club. I said this once when we were here before, but like, grow up watching this stuff, study this stuff, think about everyone who's been at the table. You guys shouted out what we've been able to do on the beat, but we've been able to do that partly because of places like this that build the culture, that create conversation, that widen people's minds. So thank you for what you guys do. I
And
really
vice
appreciate
versa,
being
man.
here.
Yeah,
Letting us
you,
come on
Ari.
your platforms.
Hell yeah.
I
Thank you.
enjoy watching you, and I also love hearing your opinion too outside of work. So
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
It's Ari Melber. It's the Breakfast Club.